When thinking about the best set of gym leaders in the Pokémon franchise, I genuinely think you can make a halfway decent argument that Sword and Shields might be up for contention. Oh, come on, man. Like, when you consider how unironically awful these games can be at times, in spite of the many flaws surrounding it, the gyms themselves aren't half bad. I like a lot of the designs, some more than others, and beyond one glaring exception, I think most of the teams are pretty solid in their foundation too. However, I do think that most movesets can be adjusted at least slightly to provide a more fitting or challenging role in the games. Like, this is the game with such broken affection mechanics that your Pokémon can drop a piano on the opponent if they love you enough. So, let's fix the Sword and Shield gym leaders. First up is Milo, and while I think that pretty much every other gym leader hits the target in some respect, this dude might as well be in space. He needs the most work done. There's quite a lot wrong with this guy as the inaugural gym leader, not even factoring his grass typing, which School Bunny go Brewer, but to have only 2 Pokemon after everything you go through before reaching him, as well as the fact that his team is basically the same Pokemon, as well as the fact that they basically have the same moves, is incredibly underwhelming. It says in his league cards that he's fairly laid back and not as focused on winning as he is having fun, so this no-nosed farm boy doesn't need to be crazy powerful, but you can absolutely do more with the possible options for his team and their moves, no doubt about it. Firstly, I questioned whether or not Voldemort here should even have an Eldegoss in the first place, because it felt a bit off character to have a cute puffball be the ace of a buff farmer, but its seeds and cotton are both mentioned as useful in the Sword and Shield Pokédex entries respectively, so it's more ingratiated in the farming gimmick than I first anticipated, whilst also being a relatively powerful Pokemon for the gym's level cap. However, Gossifleur can absolutely be taken away with the wind to give room for 2 other Pokemon to join the team, and it was a bit of a head scratcher for me. There's a lot of grass types to choose from over Galar, but a fair few don't match the vibe at all, and the others, while considerable, don't have the link to farming like I'd hoped to achieve over his whole team. Like, I would have loved to give Milo a Skiddo because they feel like a perfect match, as well as referencing X and Y's Bar de Mer ranch where you can ride them, but Skiddo got stopped at the border after Dexit. Equally, Applin is a perfect choice, and who I did have originally, and then I realized I'd forgotten its move pool looks like this, so, Nevertheless, I settled on 2 that I think fit Milo well enough. Cottony and Nuzleaf. The first may seem like it detracts from Eldegoss, yet the Pokédex entry for Shield explicitly mentions how its cotton can weave with Eldergosses for a luxury fabric, so they're almost too perfect not to put together. And considering that Milo uses Shiftry in his team when you rematch him, then Nuzleaf isn't a huge reach. Does Nuzleaf have nipples? Then Nuzleaf isn't a huge reach, along with the national tree of the UK being the oak tree, which can be a cute reference to the region's basis by using the acorn Pokemon's evolution. I think this trio is perfectly suitable, so now all that's left to give them is their moves. I'd have Cottony know Fairy Wind, Stun Spore, and Mega Drain from its Learn set, to showcase some of the grass type's capabilities in utilizing statuses. For Nuzleaf, I'd lean into its decent attack stat for this portion of the game by giving it Razor Leaf, Rollout, and Tackle, although apparently at level 1, Nuzleaf can learn Explosion. Then with Eldegoss, its moveset isn't terrible, but I think Magical Leaf and Leafage are a bit reductive to one another. Along with that, as this is the first showcase of Dynamax in a major Pokemon fight with the player, I'd opt to give it Cotton Spore instead. Not only because it doesn't have a massively deep move pool, it also would become Max Guard as a Dynamax move. Considering that this is meant to be easing new players into the gym challenge, it would showcase 3 different kinds of moves they might see for every ace Pokemon too. Even just giving Milo 2 other Pokemon makes this fight far more interesting on the off, and I think this manages to toe some added difficulty, yet not being ridiculously hard. I mean, you can probably encounter about 20 different grass counters on the way to Turffield, so it was never going to be truly impossible. Also, bro, can you put those things away?
They're like children here!
Next up is Nessa, whose team has a lot more going for it than Milo did, although I do find her character to be quite the question mark. I mean, she's the child of a fisherman and is also a model, so obviously she has the beautiful fish Pokemon as her ace, Dreadnought. I think her and Milotic are a perfect match, honestly, although she doesn't use it in any of the fights in the game. And while I thought it was a bit of a stretch, she befriends one in one of the online anime series, so I just don't get why they don't ever put 2 and 2 together. Anyway, I probably wouldn't use it here, because it's like really powerful for this point in the game, but I just wanted to put that out there. I think Dreadnought is a solid enough pick for her ace, and Arrokuda being the regional fish fits the seaside town's gym leader to a T. However, I'm sorry Goldine, you Okay, maybe I'm not sorry. There's an abundance of water types in Galar, though much like Milo, it's hard to find one that threads the needle of fitting the trainer motif, but isn't too crazy strong for this portion of the game. Thankfully, however, I think there's a really nice fish to fit in Nessa's squad, and that's Chinchu. Something about electric types and models or popular figures in Pokemon just fits in my tiny brain. And while the additional typing doesn't really do much to cover Water's weaknesses, it's a fish, it still gives her team some more type diversity, and with brief mention of Nessa getting quite electric when bested in her rare league card, it can allude to this behavior in its own way. As for the moves, I don't have much to fix with the members that we're keeping on the team. I'm not a huge fan of Whirlpool on Arrokuda, or even the move in general. However, as it's the TM Nessa gives you when you win, I'd begrudgingly keep it on the baby Barracuda, as well as give it to Chinchu, alongside the moves from its learn set of Bubble Beam, Thunder Wave, and Spark. Nothing changes for Arrokuda, it's perfectly fine for this point in the game, and Dreadnought is almost the same too. Nonetheless, Water Gun on a physical attacker that already knows Razor Shell is similar to the problem with Eldegoss, and as it learns Rock Tomb upon evolution, that slots in nicely. All in all, not a huge amount to change, but the changes we do make I think are pretty befitting. Also, did you know that only WizCash is subscribed to this YouTube channel? Yeah, I know, it's pretty crazy. But if you're enjoying the video, make sure to like and subscribe. It would make WizCash very happy. And he's tired of waiting. Okay, Kabu's third, and genuinely, this is a near perfect gym leader. He's probably the best third gym leader I can think of, large in part to how formidable yet fair his team is. 3 fully evolved and powerful fire types that, while they may have clear weaknesses you can work with, will do their best to give you trouble, along with Kabu's determined and fiery nature, as well as this gym fight figuratively rounding out the early game of Sword and Shield by being the hardest of the 3. Truly, I don't have many if any changes. But I do want to fine-tune some of the movesets. Firstly, Ninetales is slightly handicapped compared to her other teammates, because while the 2 physical attackers get the 60 base power Flame Wheel, she gets Ember and Fire Spin, which are much weaker relatively. Kabu's gimmick seems to center on trapping the trainer, so I'm willing to keep the latter, but the former can be switched with Incinerate to keep it on par with the rest of the team. Also, Quick Attack is a pretty lame move the second the games start getting harder, so that can be scrapped too. It might seem a little bit weird, but I've decided to go with Disable in its place. My argument is that the ethos of Kabu's fight seems to be him putting you under control, such as by him preventing you from switching out. So, him equally preventing you from using an otherwise powerful move for a few turns fits the vibe in my opinion. Arcanine has a great moveset across most facets, yet I think a few touch-ups are still in order. I'm not sure how I feel about both Ninetales and it having Will-O-Wisp, especially as Flame Wheel has a small chance of burning the player too. On top of that, is Agility a bit redundant? I think it is. Arcanine already has quite good speed, and the fact that the legendary dog is synonymous with extreme speed makes me think that this would be a better shout. Combine this by replacing Will-O-Wisp with Roar as another wrinkle to Kabu throwing off which of your Pokemon is in battle, in congruence with a move that will almost always supersede you, fits his motif to a T. Center Scorch, lastly, has 3 great moves in Flame Wheel, Coil, and Bug Bite, though I'm not crazy about Smokescreen. Nothing too crazy in exchange, I'd just go with Bite from its level up move pool. It's truly splitting hairs to make some of these changes though. Kabu is one of the top gym leaders in the franchise, and I think he caps off an excellent starting trio. Also, Milo is there too. Now we reach an interesting part of this video, where we have 2 gym leaders at number 4. I'm personally a bigger fan of Allister myself over B, but both are pretty alright by me. I think their aces are cool, especially in their Gigantamax forms, with some fitting team members for the most part. That being said, both of them coincidentally have similar issues with me. In the case of B, it's an interesting contrast between the fighting type as an idea, because I'd often distinguish 2 kinds of fighters overall. There's the grappling martial arts based fighters across a plethora of disciplines, and then there's the noble knights in shining armor who battle valiantly. It's not terrible to mix and match these, it may make for a more layered or interesting character. Yet B in every sense is a martial artist, being titled the Galar Karate Prodigy, and with 3 Pokemon who fight or brawl appropriately with her. And then she has a duck with a sword. Surfetched is great, don't get me wrong, it's just not something I'd think would be associated with B. I mean, surely there's not another fighting type introduced in this generation that B uses later on, whose entire design is based on grappling at all. But even if that was the case, I consider Surfetch to be a wholly different style of fighting type to really put here. In all honesty, he'd be perfect on Leon's team, or maybe even Hop's, just not with B. Grapple Locked absolutely should be in its place, as both it and Clobopus are some of the most forgettable new Pokemon in the recent games, whilst it's also just within the level cap for it to evolve. So bringing it here and giving it Octolock to trap opponents, Brick Break for solid yet not too overpowered damage, Detect to reflect B's focused personality, and Brutal Swing from the TM's list for coverage would make it decently challenging. For the rest of her team, I wouldn't change a whole lot else. Her Pangoro can honestly stay as is, as I think it's got the right balance of power and options, whilst her Hitmontop is helpless against ghosts, so I'd swap out Counter for Sucker Punch. The name seems a bit underhanded for B to use, but its Japanese name translates to Surprise Attack, which I think is more befitting an idea. As well as that, I'd change Quick Attack out for Rapid Spin, considering it does more damage as well as increases the user's speed, which fulfills the same idea. As for her Machamp, its Monstrous Attack makes all its offensive options perfectly viable. I'm just not sure about Scary Face. Sure, I get why it learns it naturally, but if you want a status move it can learn that better reflects its trainer, I prefer Focus Energy, as that would make its offensive options horrifying. Now, regarding Allister, considering he's a freaky little dude that speaks to ghosts and has a mask at all times covering his identity, his entire team represents those key points really well. Cursula is probably the biggest reach of the four, but I really enjoy the whole story behind Cursula's Galarian form to the point that I'm absolutely keeping these three. Alas, there's Yamask. Look, I totally get why they've linked the two together. It's the most ostensibly obvious choice for Allister. However, when you conquer Kabu's trio of fully evolved Pokemon, I consider that the point in the gym challenge where everyone else's team should be the same. So I'd just make sure to evolve it, which, I'm sorry Allister, I know that requires you to do the strangest evolution requirements of all time, but Runerigus is a Pokemon that can round out the team nicely. As for the moves, similarly to Pangoro, I have nothing really to change for Mimikyu. You could maybe argue Shadow Claw is a better fit than Shadow Sneak, but the eerie connotations of the latter mesh better with the gym leader. No, instead I'd give that to Runerigus, who I'd not have leading Allister's team anymore. I think it's a bit too powerful an opener, whilst other gyms tend to scale later Pokemon with the fight's difficulty. Runerigus would use Shadow Claw instead of Hex, keep Brutal Swing and Disable, and I'm also thinking that Haze is a great fourth move. It adds a bit of eerie mystique that I think befits, whilst also functioning as a counter to any setup Pokemon you might have. Cursula's set of 3 moves certainly work for it, though having 3 moves by this point in the game seems unnecessarily limiting. On top of that, at the level you fight Cursula, it can learn Strength Sap, which would pair so well with Curse, healing any health you might have lost inflicting the status on the player. Lastly is Gengar, and it's so close to being a perfect moveset for this point in the run. Unfortunately, Payback 6 out on a Pokemon that is known for its special attack. This might seem a little excessive at this point in the run, but I would just directly swap the move for Dark Pulse. 80 base power is quite strong, yet I'd argue that with it knowing Venoshock and Hex, their move power combined with Stab matches up to this choice. The new team members and slightly more rounded movesets for the pair of Stow-on-Side gyms would make the halfway point in your gym journey that much more entertaining to conquer. 5th in the gym order is Opal, and this one, somehow, was the hardest team to consider for me. It's mainly due to her different characteristics you can factor in mind. Unlike some previous leaders of different jobs or disciplines, she's just a gym leader through and through, with the whole gimmick surrounding her being that she's looking for an heir apparent to take over for her. Alongside this, her Bulbapedia page mentions that her uniform number of 910 can be linked to Japanese wordplay for cute. So it seems like a considerable amount of her character is to do with being a bit judgmental. Yet in her gym challenge, where she auditions you by asking questions, it's claimed that she does this to reveal people's true colours. So maybe it's a play on not judging a book by its own cover? I'm not sure. Going off the idea that she likes cute things, it makes sense why she'd have these two on her team. And oh fucking shit, what the fuck are those fuckers doing here? Fucking fuck shit, fuck. Nevertheless, I think Mawile matches Opal's personality to a T, with the yokai it's based on embodying the idea of a secret side to someone. Weezing's the biggest question mark for me though. Like, does it really ever fit with what Opal's going for in any way? I don't think so. Still, after looking at the other fairies you can encounter in Galar, while some might be a slightly better fit like Slurpuff or Rabombi, nothing stands out to me as necessary to join her team. Also, can you go away, please? All of that to say, I think her team is honestly not too terrible. Some of these movesets though, good god. We can do a lot better, and the moves can start to hit a lot harder. Weezing has a pretty understated set of attacks. Like, are you really using Tackle as the 5th gym leader when you also have room for another move? Let's give it Sludge Bomb instead of Sludge, Strange Steam instead of Fairy Wind, Poison Gas because Toxic is just out of reach in the Level Up Learn set, and then, you know what, throw in this bad boy. I thought Wheezing had it bad with Tackle, but Opal is coming out in public with a Morwile that has Astonish. It can learn Iron Head at level 36, and it has Astonish. Jesus Christ. Frustratingly, the only physical fairy move Morwile can learn is Play Rough, which does feel like a bit of a stretch to give it, as it wouldn't learn it by level up for a good while. But considering it's not 100% accurate, and that Opal can give you a free Omni boost at random points in the battle, it's not the worst thing in the world. So that in place of Draining Kiss, and Iron Head in place of Astonish, whilst keeping the other two, is a pretty solid moveset. Togekiss is trying its best to carry the group project the other two didn't bother showing up for, with Air Slash and Draining Kiss being sufficient stab options in my mind. I'd just make sure to give it Aura Sphere as an option for steel type coverage. Also, Togekiss has Hustle as its ability. That should be illegal. Serene Grace instead. Last is Alchemy, who probably could do with a better fairy move than Draining Kiss, but with G-Max Finale also being a healing move, I think that there's something there in this Pokemon specifically about keeping it healthy for its moves, whether that be through healing or with statuses. So let's keep those as they are. For move number 4, I was drawing it at a blank for a bit, but I ended up looking at the TM's list and gave it Mystical Fire. My rationale is that, likewise to Opal's ethos, you never know what someone is like under the surface until they're put under pressure, and giving Alchemy a steel type counter that reduces special attack plays into its other moves quite nicely. This was a tough one to try and piece together, but it's like Opal always said. What the f is up with Shiinotic? The 6th gym leaders are once again where the paths divert, with their mother and son combo of Gordie and Melony. Now, I'm not saying I have a favourite between these two or anything. God, I wish he was real. I initially was planning to go through each of their personality types again to see if this reflected well enough in the team or if there's any better options for the pair of them. However, when reading up on their pages discussing the two of them, I saw a point made that I absolutely love. Both Gordie and Melony have, in congruence with their main typing, a Monotype, a Bug type, a Water type, and a Fire type. Although the two of them apparently had a huge falling out, the parallel between their teams is such a lovely touch that I don't want to change anything about that. Gordie seemingly got a bit screwed over. At this point in the run, the trainers having moves in the 70 to 90 base power range is most apropos, yet for some reason he has Rock Tomb on his strong Pokemon and Stone Edge on his Shuckle, which is like giving 3 burly men a knife and a baby the Hydrogen Bomb. As a resolution, since Gordie is coined as a future champion, we can make some improvements that are also difficult for the player. Every Rock Tomb except for Shuckle will be replaced by Rock Slide, which is a strong 75 base power. Along with this change for Barbaracle, as it has room for a 4th move, I'm a fan of giving it Fury Cutter, as it learns it at level 12, and it's great coverage for its major weakness. Shuckle is a bit of a confusing one for me, as it's the hazard Pokemon without the moveset or team position to reflect this. I don't mind Struggle Bug or Rock Tomb, as they lower opponents' stats, and Power Split is a really funny move that now makes Stone Edge make a lot more sense, yet I'd still replace the latter with Stealth Rock. You could equally argue changing one of these 4 with Sticky Web 2, I don't mind however you put it, but something to play into its strengths, as well as making it the lead Pokemon, already makes the rest of this team scary to deal with. Speaking of such, Stonjourner's moveset is weird. It's often one of the last Pokemon to enter, yet has an entry hazard in Stealth Rock, along with the move Wonder Room, which swaps defenses with its target. Question, why? With such incredible defense but dire special defense, it doesn't really help it much at all. So I'd swap out Stealth Rock for Bulldoze to work into more speed control, and Wonder Room for Body Press to give it steel type coverage that plays into its monstrous 130 defense. Then in the case of Colossal, I'm largely fine with 3 of these moves, but Gordie, dude, brother, Stealth Rock on your final ace. Did you learn how to fight from Geeta? Smack Earthquake on that bad boy instead. Melony, on the other hand, isn't going forward as the future of Galar like her son, yet she can very easily buff up the team's moveset to make things a bit tougher for the player, considering that most Ice-type teams can be fairly easily countered, and she has a stoic and severe battle style. I'm going to start with her Ice Q, as I also think that should be the lead Pokemon. To be honest, I think you could replace this with Beartic without any issue, but likewise to Grapploct, when else are you going to see this guy in a major battle? You're sticking around, buddy. But just this once. With its Ice Face ability functioning as a safe way to withstand a hit, I think that pairs well with Hail to give her lead the opportunity to set the stage, akin to Gordie's Shuckle. Freeze Dry is okay too for decently powerful stab, and I don't hate Amnesia, but I think Icy Wind doesn't justify itself as a second Ice type attack, so I'd vie for Liquidation instead, just purely as a powerful counter to Fire and Rock types. Secondly, Frostmoth can probably scrap Hail from its moveset, as I don't see the rest of the team really utilising it beyond Ice Q's setup. I wasn't entirely sure what to go with, but considering her sharp exterior when battling, I just opted to go down the competitively sound route with Giga Drain, as it's another rock-type counter that can allude to Melony's quarrel with Gordie. Also, Ice Beam instead of Icy Wind. Darmanitan is an already incredible Pokemon, let alone in its Galarian form, that's even further alone in its Galarian Zen form, and its moveset in isolation is pretty solid. Taunt to tempt the player into activating Zen mode is a great wrinkle, and Headbutt is solid too. However, weirdly, I have an issue with its stab moves, because I feel like Melony isn't a character who would risk using a move without 100% accuracy, so going with Ice and Fire Punch feels like the right fit. And lastly, her Ace Lapras having a 55% accurate status move, alongside Icy Wind detracting from Ice Beam, is of no real use to her Ace when she can put together something deadly. Body Slam in place of Icy Wind, then Life Dew in place of Sing. The former is for solid coverage, and the latter might seem a bit underwhelming, but as a larger piece of the puzzle that is Gigantamax Lapras, I think it works like a charm. Ice-type moves for Melony's Ace transform into G-Max Resonance, which sets up Aurora Veil for a few turns to buff Lapras' defenses. So pairing that with a move that replenishes itself behind this buff may make Lapras pretty arduous for the player if they make it that far. And yeah, that's the Sir Chester duo covered. Not sure what else to say. God, I wish he was. That marks 8 gym leaders covered so far, leaving us with 2 to go. But before I talk about Piers in full detail, I do want to mention one last major change I'd make for the rest of the gyms. I think Piers and Raihan should both have 5 Pokemon. Factoring in the breadth of encounters, relative easiness and whatnot, a quintet by the 7th gym isn't that bad. It also gives me the chance to add a bit more to Piers, who I think already does a pretty good job conveying his personality through the team. Scrafty mirrors his aloof demeanor, Malamar is a contrarian, likewise to Piers being the only gym leader not to Dynamax. Obstagoon parallels Piers about as one-to-one a Pokemon to a trainer as Ash Greninja, and Skuntank matches because he, stinks? I wouldn't change any of these 4, and to accompany them, I think I'd opt to give him an Umbreon. Of the other dark types in the region, some of them are already taken by Marnie, whilst the others don't fit very well. Umbreon, on the other hand, being a friendship evolution, can represent Piers' support of his sister and grunts, in spite of his cold exterior. It's a pretty great team composition. But some of the team's movesets though, good lord. Scrafty can justify Brick Break and Payback, while Fake Out is another nod to Piers' subversion as a gym leader. But Sand Attack? Really? Let's make sure teams are sufficiently rounded at this stage by pulling from their learnable TMs. So we'll throw Scrafty Poison Jab as a fairy type counter. Malamar has 4 pretty good moves in isolation, yet having 3 dark type moves feels incredibly redundant. Keep Night Slash, swap Foul Play for Pluck for a bug type counter, and maybe swap out Payback for Reflect? Considering Chairman Rose tried to get Piers to move, yet the latter stayed quite insular, giving his Pokemon a move that reflects this concept, no pun intended, works out in my mind. In regards to the newest edition, I'd like to utilise its representation of Piers in a hearty and defiant manner. Dark Pulse for a strong dark move in battle, Moonlight as a means to heal as well as represent Piers' solace in darkness, Confuse Ray to play again into his subversion to the player, and Iron Tail for fairy type coverage. Skuntank has a solid moveset, where I think you can justify keeping it as is, although I'd probably opt to take out Screech. Toxic is a much better move, and limiting it to this sole status move works better for it. Replace it with Venoshock, Poison Jab, Sludge Bomb, take your pick. Obstagoon is much the same too, a great moveset variety, albeit I'd probably take out Counter for a move to utilise its normal typing. There's a few options like Headbutt, Takedown, and Mega Punch. Ultimately I decided on Retaliate though. It seems like Piers harbours some resentment at not being able to keep Spikemuth at the same popularity as other towns in Galar, so his lead having a move to exemplify this in a Fatal Blow covers all dimensions of his character. And last, but certainly not least, is Raihan. Unlike the last 8th gym leader I've covered, I'm actually a huge fan of this guy's gym team. It's not only a decently synergized, albeit simple weather team, as well as a double battle to compound strategies. His specialist type doesn't dictate his whole team, which already adds so much more challenge and dimension to a fight, even if it adheres to similar principles. I honestly have a lot more to say about the depth of the fight than I do Raihan's character. He's a guy that likes selfies, with a passing interest in Galar's history, who can't ever beat Leon for some reason. Maybe it's because his Elite Four team is an abomination, or maybe it's because he could do with another team member to fit this one. Who's to say? It's me. I'm to say. Let's go with the remainder of his team first. Beginning with his lead Gigalith, it's fantastic for setting the stage by functioning as a slow sand setter, as well as having the capacity to set up stealth rocks. Rock Blast and Body Press are functionally fine moves too, but Sand Tomb sticks out like a sore thumb. Not only due to its lack of power, but I think it directly contradicts Stealth Rock by trapping Pokemon against entry hazards. So rather, I'd go with Bulldoze. It's the same typing, it's more powerful, and giving the player stat drops makes them more inclined to switch. Flygon has another solid moveset too, with Breaking Swipe working well in doubles, and the rest for powerful coverage. What's glaring in this moveset though is a lack of a ground type move. Earthquake is an obvious answer, yet with the majority of the team at risk to super effective friendly fire, I think Earth Power in place of Thunder Punch isn't too bad here. It might not utilize Flygon's stronger attack, yet it gives it something in its wheelhouse to utilize Stab, as well as give some special move options for a predominantly physical team. Sandaconda feels like a great utility Pokemon in the overall team. It almost functions secondary to attacking, in place of keeping the field sandy with its ability, as well as using status moves to let the rest of the team take initiative. Firefang is at least solid coverage for grass and ice types too, leaving just Earth Power. Even though I said that there should be more special type coverage, considering how much worse Sandaconda's special attack is relatively, I'd opt to give it Drill Run as a strong stab option. This leaves the ace of Raihan, Duraludon, and I don't have anything else to change about this guy. Good night, everybody! Yeah, no, they nailed the ace. I have nothing I want to change about it, and its moves are a brilliant mix, which just leaves the elusive 5th Pokemon. And this is the one I truly contemplated. Raihan's a dragon-type specialist, but he doesn't always have dragons. He has a Sands team, but he doesn't have a Pokemon that utilizes it in some form or capacity. Ideally, I'd like to get him a 3rd dragon, and I'm torn between 3. I really like the idea of Arctovish or Dracovish, because they both have the hidden ability Sand Rush. Raihan also demonstrates some interest in history in relation to the Darkest Day when you first enter Hammerlock, so they have a soft link to his character as fossils. Hey, just very briefly while I'm editing this at like 1 in the morning, I lied, and I don't know what I'm talking about here, but just new law dropped. That being said, while you can argue the case, I think there's one Pokemon that fits that little bit more. Kommo-o. Reason number 1, it's a dragon type that can have the Overcoat ability, which gives it an immunity to the Sandstorm, as well as safely provide some great options with its speed and fighting typing. Reason number 2, from its description on the Old Sun and Moon webpage, there's apparently a legend about Kommo-o's scales glittering in order to drive away a great darkness covering the world, which is so coincidental for whatever this bro was yapping about that it's almost too perfect. And reason number 3, I think it can have a great moveset to fit into the double battle format. It learns clanging scales upon evolution, which hits both opponents for big damage, as well as Protect at level 1, a move so ubiquitous and important in double battles that having something to bait a fairy type move can turn momentum away from the player on a dime. Top it off with Dragon Tail to force any Pokemon into Stealth Rocks and Drain Punch for high powered stab, and you've got a solid team player to fit the overall machine that is Raihan's team. With this inclusion, it's not a crazy powerful final fight, yet makes for an enjoyably formidable final gym leader to cap off the Galarian Gym Challenge. Anyway, I think that does it. Thanks so much for watching it through to the end, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm not quite sure how to end this video, to be honest.